I just do want to pick up on one point Mike Pizzullo made earlier. He said that the presence of US forces and AUKUS, draw us further into it. And for your viewers at home, I just want to reinforce that, in my view, I very strongly believe that maintaining the strategic balance in the region is our best deterrence. So I don't think Mike was saying otherwise. I'm sure he wasn't, but just for your viewers to understand that it's not a reason not to be strengthening our relationship with the US. On the public perception, this would be difficult. I think the days of war being simple in terms of public perception, just driven by all-in patriotism, might be behind us. And it would be a hard sell to explain why we are spending so much blood and treasure on an island state that we recognise as part of China, and in fact the US and the UK and all our major allies and partners recognise as being part of China. So it would be a difficult one to prosecute in the public marketplace. And Alex and I both sat in the NS, National Security Committee of the Cabinet. We know how difficult these decisions can be. This would be a very difficult position, but I agree with the collective that just as NATO countries have been charged with seeking the security guarantee without doing the heavy lifting, we would need to be true and fully committed to our alliance relationship.
Yeah. I just want to disagree with only one thing there. I don't think it would be a very hard sell with the public. I think when the war erupted, the public would be outraged at what China had done. They would be outraged, and they would very strongly support our involvement and America's engagement and Japan's.
I think the lesson from the last couple of decades is that Western publics do go all in to support these kind of things where they see the right purpose. And if you talk to some senior people in Ukraine, none of them predicted that young Ukrainians wouldn't rally to the flag. So I think we can expect in the initial phases there would be broad public support, but sustaining that, given the lack of strategic patience in most
But I want to pick up on something
that
Alexander.
Right.
Yeah, I want to pick up on something that Alexander said, though. It is a United States under Donald Trump. So we've been thinking about the threat that comes from China, and I'll go to Peter Jennings on this as well. I know you've got another point there, Peter, but we now have a mercurial White House. How much does that change our equation?
I think that's less important than people imagine, because the test for the United States is not so much about the defence of Taiwan, it's about the defence of their own position as a global superpower. And are they prepared to see that eroded by China being victorious in this part of the world? It's a critical question, though, Chris, because I think, what we need to do here is try to get into the mind of Xi Jinping. And his ideology says that the West is in terminal decline, the US is in terminal decline. I think he misreads the US and the West. But that's very dangerous, because if he thinks he can get away with an attack because the Americans and the Allies won't oppose it, then that is going to make his choice easier. The choice that Mick was talking about is something that, he has to be guaranteed of success before he goes.
And this is the essential point, I think, that any war that does happen, hopefully it doesn't, will start through miscalculation by at least one side.
Yes.
And deterrence is all about reducing the risk of miscalculation.
Okay, Jennifer and then Ross.
I want to pick up on this alliance theme for a little bit, because there is this growing rhetoric that I hear in Australia that it is our relationship with the US that is putting us in danger. And I just want to kind of flip that in terms of it is actually our relationship with the US that actually has allowed us to be so protected in many ways. And I think we need to be very careful with the alliance. I think the alliance is in our interest, but we aren't abrogating our responsibilities to the alliance. And I think there's a danger there that actually since the 90s, with our reduction in investment capability, we are relying too much on the US. And I think that's the conversation we need to be having.
Ross.
I just want to make the point that if there were to be such a crisis, it wouldn't just be the United States who has a seat at the table in a way. And I emphasise in particular, obviously the Taiwanese, their capacity to strengthen and operate effectively in their own domain. It's not insignificant. But let me remind everybody that the Japanese have a very strong stake and have a very special relationship with the Taiwanese, and they are unlikely to sit on their hands. And if the Japanese are committing themselves and others in the region, then it's extremely unlikely, even if there was some hesitancy in the White House, it's very unlikely that the United States would stay aloof. And besides, they are making this theatre the prominent and the dominant area for their investment and their planning and their force structure development and posture.
I just want to pick up a point that Catherine drew out earlier, which I think is really important. Probably not on day zero, but day -0. I think there'd be a concerted effort by China to get inside our heads through subversion, through diaspora, etc. And the point would be, and a clever Chinese play would be, hopefully there's not too many of them watching this
Big listenership there.
would be to actually say to Australia, look, we accept the joint facilities that have been there for a long time. You're not going to kick those out. However, strikes against our forces or our mainland, even worse, from Australia, you will pay for centuries. Now, we've got 2 former cabinet ministers around the table. They'd have to consider, the current decision makers would have to consider that threat to say, okay, I get it. To Jennifer's point, we have to go all in on the alliance, because if we're supporting strikes from Australia, that will resonate for decades, indeed centuries. That, I think, is actually the key decision, which isn't Australian forces striking. There might be an element of that. It's US forces striking from Australia. That is the question.